Welcome back to the show, everybody. We got a very special guest. It's going to be Linda P. Jones here to talk with us about Bitcoin, the great distraction. Somebody roll that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are here with Linda P. Jones and myself, and today we're going to talk about Bitcoin, the great distraction. Today's show brought to you by Glint. Glint is the key, and gold is security. I love this. You can get a debit card with your gold on it. It is physically allocated gold. You can buy, save, and spend real gold and hedge inflation. And Lord knows it's only going to get worse. So make sure you check the link underneath the video. But right now, I want to bring on Linda P. Jones. Linda, how are you today?
I'm great, Brad. Great to be back with you.
It is great to have you back. You know, I just spent the weekend, the last few days, down in Miami at the Bitcoin conference, and I attended the one last year. And I have to tell you, it was 8 times bigger or 10 times bigger than the one last year. And I came away with some feelings about that conference, and there was a lot of good energy there. Don't get me wrong, but let me just show you what I saw down there. This right here. Now, I didn't see this actual moment when it was taking place, but this was the attitude and energy of most people that I ran into. And this is obviously Max Kaiser doing his famous tear up dollars into shreds. Linda, talk to me here.
Well, this is, of course, I think a Bitcoin, it's part of their whole belief system is that the central banking system is not the best system. And to one degree, I agree with that. But I also think that we have to have some form of money. And I doubt that it's going to be something where it's Bitcoin for a lot of reasons that we're going to talk about today. But we are at the precipice, I think, of a new global system for money being reset is the word they use. And I think we're at the end of the fiat system. So in one regard, I understand what he's saying and what he's doing. In the other regard, I don't think it's the answer. And we're going to talk about what we think that answer is today.
That's absolutely right. And I tell you, there is a part of me that says, yeah, the central banking system certainly is flawed, and fractional lending and all of those things. So, I mean, on that part, you know, I certainly align. I know you do too. But when I see someone doing this for the cause of their own pursuit of investment of something like Bitcoin, I think to myself, you have really just put every government crosshair on your back when you're tearing up their money in front of their face. I just can't see how it's helping. But I'll tell you this, it was so big and so overwhelming at that conference. And I mean, it was just so grandiose. It reminded me of Tulip Mania, the first ever economic bubble. But it's not really an economic bubble. What we're really talking about here is systemic problems with the technology Bitcoin. Linda, talk about that for a second.
That's right. I study bubbles and cycles, and I actually wrote about 12 anecdotal signs of bubbles in my book. And this is not actually what I consider a full-on bubble. Now, when we go back to 2017, that Bitcoin bubble was a full-on bubble, and I did talk about it being a bubble at that time. What we're seeing right now with the price declining is not typically where bubbles pop. But I think you're right. The real bubble is not the price of Bitcoin as much as the systemic risk that Bitcoin and Tether, which is supporting Bitcoin, is going to turn out to be causing in the system. And that's what we want to talk about.
Oh, wow. So what we're really pointing to here is a multifaceted problem that really starts with Tether, isn't it?
It is. Tether has had, as I understand it, 3 lawsuits against it. There is some concern that it has not been transparent. There is some concern that Evergrande bonds are behind Tether. And we all know that Evergrande is the real estate company that's had trouble in China that is, 50 times larger than what we went through in 2008 with our real estate crisis.
Oof.
And this is very concerning.
Yes, it is. And Tether CTO Polo Ardonio says here, he told CNBC that the stablecoin issuer would continue to reduce its commercial debt holdings, and he said that Tether would improve transparency of its USD Tether reserves moving forward. But, there is the question, some people consider Evergrande to be like China's Lehman Brothers moment, which is just a horrible, horrible thing if it happens, right? And it does look like it's going to happen.
It looks like Tether is on the verge of something not good happening here. And that could be from a default on the bonds. That could be on some connection between Bitcoin and Tether that goes awry. For example, apparently there was a dormant wallet with 8 years with $150 million of Bitcoin in it, which is exactly the amount of the payment that was due for Tether as it was in default. So is there a connection there that's direct, more direct than we might realize? That may be where the bubble is.
Wow. Now that could be a real problem. Then there's this cryptic post and tweet from CZ Binance. You had actually asked me about this, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. And then everything started to come together, and I was like, I think we've got a show here. When the Titanic sinks, little floats near it get dragged down too, but the floats will eventually come back up if they are untethered.
That word untethered just made my hair stand up. And I was thinking, well, it's 100 and some years since the Titanic sank. And his comment about little floats near it might mean other cryptocurrencies might get dragged down if Tether brings down Bitcoin. It might bring down all cryptocurrencies, the whole market, but the ones that could actually be backed by something physical like gold, silver, other assets, which we've talked about possibly happening with some of the ISO 20022 cryptos, that the future for those is to be backed by something of real value, which is what we know has to happen when you create a new currency after a fiat currency. You've got to have value backing it.
You do. You absolutely have to have value backing it. And I mean, look, and the Tether possibly connected to inflating things like Bitcoin, possibly Ethereum and other things of that nature that are connected to it. And if they are untethered, they may not be affected. Now, I think this also is a fine place for us to point out, too, that we see the United States and the U.S. Treasury heavily focused on stable coin regulation. I do not find these things to be mutually exclusive from one another. Do you?
I don't. And we know the banking system has to plan things years in advance. These things are tested, they are worked out. The ISO 20022 is simply a messaging system, but what it is a standardization of the messaging system so that all of those cryptos that are in that are abiding by that, they can all be read by any computers. And so this planning for these cryptos that are going to be the survivors, I think has been in the works for many years. And that's where XRP, XLM, and some others come in, and why the talk about CBDCs has suddenly ramped up and been on the news lately, particularly with Crypto Dad being on CNBC this week.
Oh, absolutely. And it was a great, great spot that he had. He had a lot to say. And I certainly am looking forward to seeing what comes out of the push in the Project Lithium for the DTCC as well. But so what you're essentially saying to me is that this shipping container, if we could take DAI out of it, all the mining equipment in it is really not necessary. Isn't that what Chris Larson said to us not long ago?
That is what Chris said to us. He wanted to make some adjustments to fix that. And there's also I hear something going on with the Three Gorges Dam where there is Bitcoin mining underneath that. Is that what you hear?
I have heard that there is an area right down from that should that happen, God forbid, that would really damage or wipe out that mining facility that exists there. And, just to understand, when I walked around that convention and saw these giant shipping containers being advertised there, that you could get one of these containers or as many as you wanted, and you could start mining Bitcoin too. But understanding that XRP does fix this, just like DAI's post. But it also reminds me of Chris Larson and the fact that he said, this tech is no longer necessary. So what are we doing? What is happening? This is what feels like a bubble, but is really pointing to the systemic issue of the tech. Look, you're not going to get rid of the technology, but if it's not necessary, why use it?
Exactly. And I think that Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency to get us used to what crypto is, to have people start using it, to get our attention. But we all saw some of the limitations that it had as a payment system. And so then it became a store of value. Well, now they're trying to bring out the Lightning Network to try to say it's going to be a payment system again. Well, in the meantime, XRP has had years and 400 relationships with banks that it has already established and is already working on this without all of this extra, these boxes or any of these extra technologies necessary. It's just not needed.
You're absolutely right. When I look at this, and then I saw this post here, which kind of puts a real point on this. I said XLM equals queen, XRP equals king. It's the same protocol. One's a nonprofit company behind it. One's a profit company behind the tech. And then, one has the escrow and one burned the escrow, right? So there's your real macro differences, but the tech is the tech, and XLM and XRP have been taking over. And to go even further, we know that there's speculation, at least in David Morgan's camp on Stansberry Research, who says that, it's being considered to put the new digital dollar on the back of XRP, Linda.
That's right. And XRP has been used for institutions, governments, and banks, and XLM has been used for the individual. Mm-hmm. And I think that their technology is so superior. Whenever I use XLM or XRP to transfer money, it happens almost instantaneously with very low fees. It's such a pleasure to use those versus when I try to use Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's just a nightmare with the fees and the length of time it takes. It really shows up just in our everyday use of crypto, how superior the technology is with XLM and XRP.
Absolutely. And for those who didn't see it, I'm going to play this little 8-second clip here so David Morgan can tell you what he's been listening to. Take a listen.
How far along they are, I'm not certain. I have looked into this fairly deeply. There is some talk of going on the back of, let's say, an XRP or some other currency that's out there now that's functioning well and has been basically tested.
And I mean, that's pretty remarkable. Now, I understand, and I know you do too, that that's David Morgan's speculation from his circles, but I do find it to be a pretty powerful statement coming from somebody who's largely a gold bug. But
yes, and you also mentioned in this tweet cyber attacks, and I do want to say that we have been warned about cyber attacks. They are actually happening. One of my tech people was telling me that there was an attack, and he's just shocked that it's not in the media, but it was all over the tech world, this attack that happened. And we're hearing more about attacks coming actually tomorrow, Friday. And I don't know why they're centering around that day, but that happens to be when we're hearing a lot of rumors about potential cyber attacks.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because just a few months ago, my wife at her work, which is really a company that's located all over the world, they experienced a breach in their payroll provider that they deal with, and it caused problems for months. And truthfully, there's still a few issues they're still trying to get sorted out from it. It's just a nightmare if this happens on grand scale, especially if the banks experience this, Linda, like the Russians have threatened.
But don't we need a period of time where we would move from the banking system to a new banking system? Wouldn't that conversion take maybe a few days. It makes sense to me that this could be the cover for that.
It could absolutely be the cover for that. And you know what? Going beyond speculation, we are not speculating to understand that Ripple does have a private ledger. They're already working with the likes of Central Bank of Bhutan. They're already working with the Republic of Palau to introduce a dollar, which is backed by the US dollar on the ledger there. So that sounds like a testing ground to me for sure. And we also know, Linda, that if I could, 1 second right here, let me pause. Okay, so we had my computer, so many tabs open, it tried to crash on me, but we got it back here. So looking at this, the IMF has even said we're headed into a new era of digital money. Linda?
You know, Brad, I think the picture I'm seeing is not the one you wanted to show.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, so this is the actual tab I wanted you to see. This is the IMF right here, a new era of digital money. Linda?
Yes, and isn't it interesting that the IMF put this out? The IMF, as I understand it, when a country has a currency, the IMF has to own some of that currency. So we know El Salvador made Bitcoin their official currency. If something happens to Bitcoin because of Tether, that might bring down the IMF. That could cause the whole financial system to have to reboot.
Well, you know, you make such a very good point, because the truth is the IMF has been very clear that we are moving towards a multipolar system. And whether it's Bitcoin or something else, I have warned people that this El Salvador experiment is not going to go well. And before we get out of here today, we're actually going to get an update from this morning from CNBC on exactly how that's going. But because the IMF is telling us we are moving towards a multipolar system, Linda, that means collateral from everything: the metals, stocks, bonds, oil, all kinds of assets. That's what we're talking about backing. But we know through history, gold has always been the foundation to any monetary system, has it not?
That's right, it has. And when a fiat currency fails, that is what brings confidence and faith back into a new currency.
Well, and as it would have it, history has it, central banks hoard 20% of total gold supply. I mean, they, over the last handful of years, have been quietly really increasing their gold holdings.
Well, they have, and they've also been changing their Basel III requirements and so on to require banks to have gold and to value gold the same as money, which it wasn't always valued that way on the asset books of a bank. So now we're seeing that gold is gaining importance again. Again, this has been planned for years. These are things that have been ongoing in the background for years. And it wouldn't be unusual for gold to be reset at a higher price, as you and I have talked about before, to give more value. But the beauty of gold is that it's in limited supply, and that's why it is used as the basis of a financial system, because it can't just be created out of thin air like paper can and be printed into oblivion.
Absolutely right. Well said, Linda. And I tell you, when I think about all of this, I mean, we see that gold recently had a new all-time high of over $2,000. There's people talking about it going to 3,000 plus, maybe by the year's end or shortly after. And, I could certainly see that taking place. But coming back to Bitcoin and the conference and everything that's been happening and the fervor behind it, I'm reminded in my mind that that's what this video we got together today was all about. The great distraction, because I feel like it's a great distraction for Bitcoin to get retail holders and investors away from gold. And it also is a great distraction because it takes you away from the idea of which protocols will actually be the mainstay for the framework of this new digital asset space. And I firmly believe, and my speculation is, it's XRP and XLM.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that there's been a lot of disclosure about that. I mean, I don't think we're speculating. I think we're just stating what the facts are. This is the backbone of the new financial system. XRP, again, at the institutional governmental level, banking level, and XLM for the people and for spending and things like that for personal wallets. It makes total sense, and I think we're right on the verge of it.
Well, I want to play this clip and then get your final thought here about what you're seeing. This is the update from this morning on the experiment with Bitcoin as legal tender in El Salvador.
El Salvador made Bitcoin a national currency. The country's president has promoted it endlessly, but there are two questions people really want to know. Does it work? And does anyone really use it? NBC's Gadi Schwartz spent 48 hours on the ground in El Salvador to find out.
Hey there, we are here in El Salvador. This is the first country to take the promise and the dream of Bitcoin and actually turn it into an official currency. These are the ATMs where people load up their phones and they can use Bitcoin to buy everyday things. But how does it work? Hey, we finally got our money 2.5 hours later, $199.01. Not sure where the 99 cents went, but money's on our phone. They got special lines for people paying in Bitcoin. Okay, so we got our groceries, but not because we paid in Bitcoin. They said that their transaction had been canceled. It showed that it had gone through on our account, so we're down about $14. This is the second time we've tried to use Bitcoin with Strike Wallet here in El Salvador, and we're 0 for 2.
Linda.
Yeah, not really working well as a payment coin, is it?
And I mean, this is not the first time it's failed. Listen, I know a lot of people will hear this and think, we're maxis. And I'll tell you, I am, but it's not an XRP maxi. I'm a utility maxi. And if your project has utility, I want to be a part of it. And this isn't it. And I have to ask you, Linda, when this truth becomes more and more obvious, and if you're correct and we're correct about Tether propping up things like Bitcoin as a bubble side, you combine not a bubble issue, but a bubble issue with a systemic problem with the technology issue and implementation and practical application. What are we looking at then?
Well, I think, Brad, we're on the verge of getting a new financial system. And in order to have a new financial system, the old system has to have reasons why it doesn't work. And we've been talking today about multiple reasons why it doesn't work and the problems and issues that it's likely to have right here. So it's quite possible that we could see this issue with Tether cause problems with Bitcoin, which creates a systemic problem, which means we have to have a new banking system because everything goes upside down, and we have to bring in what has been planned for a long time, a new system with real value backing it.
Absolutely. That's so well said. And I have to ask people, should these things play out? And I believe to a degree they're going to at some point. I can't pretend to know when, but I do believe it will play out. But I have to ask people, if you're holding this asset, ask yourself what will happen to this asset if it's no longer the number one market cap in crypto. Will people then be forced to look and have the conversation that we're having right now about where the real intrinsic value with this technology and this digital asset is?
I think they will. But again, this is something that Bitcoin maxis have been, very stubborn about ever selling, and they're just going to be holding their Bitcoin. So we'll have to see how that turns out for them.
Absolutely. Linda, thank you for being here to discuss the great distraction from gold and what I believe is the real protocols that will rise from the ashes like a phoenix. I call it XRP. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.